good morning or whatever, depending on where you are. The only thing we know within the boundaries of this webinar, it's not good evening anywhere, so that's good, I guess. Maybe it's sad, but here we are. I look forward to all of them, but some I look forward to a little bit more because of subject matter. The conversation we're going to have today is less about lower law and more about how you process, and how you process as a person in the business, as a leader, as a businessman or businesswoman. You know, how do you think? We have some very logical thinkers in our leadership group that are wonderfully disciplined, but struggle a little bit dealing with the emotional aspects of the business. We have very emotional leaders who struggle with some of the kind of logic and anyway, as you would expect, we have a full range. And yet we have this wide variety of people and personalities and backgrounds and educational levels and faith and ethnicity and age and obviously gender. But the reality is that we have this huge and wonderful spectrum of people that are succeeding. And you'll find that the most successful have certain foundational things, fundamental things in common. And we're going to discuss 5 of those, 5 certainly are the most prominent. This is one of those moments again where I use my Harry Potter's wand example. And if I had Harry Potter's wand and I could wave it and you would all get these 5 things solidly as a part of who you are, I would eagerly do that for the blessing that it would be. Excuse me while I clear my throat. For the blessing it would be in your life and then in your business, and then how that in turn would reward you and your team. So, appreciate that you are on the call, on the webinar, and that we can do this. A lot of you say some very nice things, I got to admit, that I notice. Someone said I have no sound as it started. Yes, it has, and you need to call in, but I don't know how we're going to tell you because you can't hear me. So I think that was before we started, though. I always love that stuff. Anyway, let's go ahead and begin and talk this through. I'm not sure how long it's going to last. Longer than a half hour, shorter than an hour. So let's give that a shot. The 5 pillars of business success. It used to be 4. Then I could say the 4 cornerstones. That was so much better of a title. You can't go 5 cornerstones. Anyway, I guess you could with a pentagon, but here we are. Let's go ahead. As we consider these things, I want you to ponder this quote. I've used it quite a bit the last 6 or 7 months. Discuss it in our retreats, did it at Tiger School. It is a really good thing to reflect upon. Great leadership is about wisdom, not intelligence. Today we have an abundance of information, but we have a scarcity of wisdom. As a ecclesiastical leader in our church, having a responsibility for a congregation of young single adults, I'm interviewing all the time, a lot like the business. I mean, a lot of the parallel experiences. There's one young man in our congregation who's brilliant. He works at one of the tech companies. He writes code. He's one of those guys, that just, his mind works different than most other people. He was the guy who got bored in 10 minutes in a geometry class because he had it from the beginning to the end already, while I just fought through it, For those of you that heard that story at convention. And and I never took another math class after that, and that was my sophomore year of high school, because I just had no interest. It wasn't my aptitude, and there it was. This guy's, of course, brilliant in all of that. But it's interesting watching him struggle as a young man in personal relationships when he dates, because he doesn't have a clue, about how to read what other people feel or how to respond to that, and that tends to make him selfish and self-centered, and so he has tremendous intelligence, but hardly enough wisdom to function in some areas, and I'm not talking about autism or struggling with some other thing. This is just, the areas in which he has developed himself. I have good news. If you're super intelligent, you can still be wise, but intelligence won't give you wisdom. It's a different thing. And when you think about it, you can Google anything, right, and stuff comes up, and you have that abundance of information. But has it made people wiser? Are they managing their marriages better? Well, statistics say no. Are they managing their children better? Statistics say no. With all this knowledge, has crime reduced? Or is there less need for prisons? The statistics overwhelmingly say no. And so you think about that, and what's the gap between the two? Being able to go 2 and 2 equals 4 is a lot different to coming to a decision about how to treat somebody. Somebody maybe that's annoyed you a little bit or frustrated you. And as a leader, you feel maybe you have be justified in telling them off, or just shoving their own words down their throat, or whatever it might be. But if you were wise, based on intelligence, you might do it. But if you were wise, you'd understand that patience is needed there. Understanding is needed there. That if you get angry yourself and respond in that way, that then the situation will not be improved, it will be worsened. And we all have made these mistakes, and many others I could describe. That's not really the question. The question is, how many times do we have to make these mistakes? Because a person who's gaining wisdom studies the mistakes and makes the adjustment. And it's not determined by ego or these types are pride. And wisdom will tell you that greed is a weakness and will damage relationships, will cause people ultimately not to trust you if they know you're greedy. If you're prideful and arrogant, they'll desire not to associate with you. Wisdom would teach us that we needed to get control of those things, that we needed to reduce their influence in our lives. Same thing about an emotion like anger, where we lose control, perhaps of ourselves physically, but certainly of our tongues, and lose control of our minds and our thinking. And we can do months worth of damage, or even years worth of damage in a relationship in literally minutes if we're not careful. Wisdom teaches us that. And so as we start and ponder these 5 things, I want you to consider, not all this is super deep or anything. If you know me, you know I'm not going to be deep all the time. But as you consider these things and what they mean in your life, as they apply to wisdom, as they apply to your own capacity to lead others and to handle the world and all its foolishness, I want you then I think if you do, then you'll understand how useful they can be. So let's go to these 5 pillars. I didn't take this from a book. I'm sure I've taken it from lots of talks and people and things I've read. But I sat down one day a while ago and I said, okay, if I were going to have 4 or 5 things that everybody, as I look out at people, that the best ones have. This isn't so much a conversation about giants. I do have a talk that's the 8 things all giants have in common. But this is grounded, happy people who also prosper. You know, I've known giants that weren't happy. I mean, giants in the business who made tremendous sums of money and never found any peace. And I've watched them self-destruct over time and lose that giant status, if you will, which isn't the most important thing to lose. The most important thing to lose is your personal happiness and the happiness of your loved ones. So let's talk about this one at a time. And here's the first one. We're going to talk about common sense. This is a form of intelligence. I've read that there are 3. There's the analytical intelligence, the kind that a lot of engineers have here in Silicon Valley where we live. Like that young man has tremendous analytical intelligence. I counsel other young men and young women who are very artistic, you know, and their intelligence about the arts, whether it be painting or music, and there's usually some overlap. They're kind of a little bit Renaissance people, each in their own right, and they look at the world in a different way, and they tend to be very sensitive, sometimes hurt easily, because their senses are in tune to things that a lot of us kind of just move right on by. You know, they see art in things that you and I just glance at. I enjoy my association with people like that, and I appreciate it. But that's not the kind of intelligence that this is either. It's not an analytical intelligence. It's not an artistic intelligence. All of those things are gifts, as is this. And I have good news. We could become more artistic. In other words, we may not have an aptitude for music, but if we would practice and practice, we can learn to read music, we can learn to play the piano, we can learn to play the guitar. And we may never be great as a songwriter or things like that, but there are all kinds of things we could accomplish if we'd apply ourselves. This is one of those areas, if you don't feel like you're real strong, I want you to do 2 things. 1, study it, come to understand it better, and work on developing it in yourself. And 2, during that time, if you can find mentorship, leadership, that has an abundance of common sense, study them, watch it in practice. Consider the difference how they react to things, like saving money or how they treat people, or that stuff like that. And then learn from that too. Also, when you're not sure, when you come to a fork in the road or questions in your mind, and you know you need to apply common sense to the solution, and you're not sure you have enough yet, then talk to somebody who does. You know, I have a friend in the business, a leader, who knows that he doesn't kind of manage money very well, sometimes overreaches himself. And to his credit, when it comes to those kind of decisions, and we've had a long-standing relationship, he'll call me. Once he was being enticed to an office to take over a lease from another leader, and it was much bigger than he needed, much more elaborate. It would have been a real hardship for him. But his inclination is to kind of want those things. You know, the statement and, the overstatement, I should say. But he called me, told me about the situation, the cost, the square footage, and I said, don't do it. Absolutely not. And he didn't, to his credit. And later, we had several conversations about how glad he was that that didn't happen and how that would have really set him up for failure in some areas, other areas of his business. And so common sense is an interesting thing because it allows clear thinking, especially about business things, and a lot of what I'll call people skill things. A person with a lot of common sense looks at somebody, knows they're struggling, knows that's not the time to criticize them, but the time to encourage them. And it's a simple, straightforward thought process. Again, I urge you to study it. We're going to study it a little bit for a few minutes now. And someone who has common sense and has this simple, straightforward thought process is going to catch him or herself, for example, in an area like this. Being positive is better than being negative. I gave a talk at the convention, and really it was a very simple and again straightforward conversation. And with with those of you that are part of the business, and what's interesting as we kicked around some of those things, how it struck some people and some of the feedback I got. It was interesting. And I called it, high pay behavior versus low pay behavior. Smart behavior versus stupid behavior. And when I say this, I mean common sense behavior versus someone who lacks that common sense. Another word for common sense, when it's measured more scientifically, it's called basic intelligence. Someone with some common sense understands, wow, being honest is going to get me so much better result than being dishonest. And like I said, being positive better than being negative. But being unselfish is going to be better than being selfish. Being likable is probably going to get me better results than being a jerk. Common sense tells us these things, right? That I'm going to get a better result with the men and women of our team if I'm encouraging them versus discouraging them. If I'm tending to find things to praise about them versus finding things to criticize about them. That humility gets better result in life than arrogance. That being nice to people gets a much better result than being hard-hearted or mean. That being happy is better than being grumpy. This is not deep stuff. Yet it's very elusive for people. And so I found throughout my career, not only did I need to work on my common sense, but I needed to help people work on theirs to see these obvious things in a much simpler and straightforward way. This especially applies in relationships. If you have common sense, you understand what this means. What goes around comes around. We know that the way we act and the way we put that out among the people who are around us, our families, our business associates, anywhere, right? That the way we act comes back to us. And if we're going to be negative, it comes back negative. If we're going to be happy and positive, it doesn't always come back 100% positive, any more than it always comes back 100% negative. But the reality is, the majority of what will happen to you will be similar to what you put out there. If you're patient, if you're forgiving, people will be more forgiving of you. If you're arrogant, people will be more of that way around you and give it back to you. I know this is pretty simple, but if you be honest with yourself, lots of us need to reflect on this just a little bit more than we do. For example, again, another very simple thing. When people feel good, they do good. So when people feel bad, the opposite is true, common sense tells us, then they tend to do bad, or much more poorly. So knowing that to be true, then you and I, as people who, whether we in our homes or at church or in leadership or anywhere we are, in any kind of setting, the more we can contribute to people feeling good, the better they're going to do. In our businesses, then we need to get good at helping people feel good, right? 'Cause that will improve their result and their own personal happiness, of course. And here's another saying. All of you have heard it, I suspect. But it's fundamentally true. Happy wife, happy life. if you're in a marriage and you really strive to contribute all that you can to the happiness of your sweetheart, then very good things come back. And so these sayings, what goes around comes around. People feel good, they do good. Happy wife, happy life. It's interesting how many people will nod their head and when they hear these things and then make no effort to make these things come true in their, to understand and apply them, day to day in their life. You see, in relationships, we need to understand these kinds of things. And it applies back to basic intelligence or that simple, straightforward thought process that teaches us that being positive, being negative, among other things. As part of it, another form of it, as applied to business, we'll call business sense. Now, business sense, and those who have it, those who develop it, will know they must control their expenses. Because business needs to make a profit. Your family needs to make a profit. You want to take in more money, more income than you spend in your family so you can build savings and security, both for emergencies and also for the time where you want control or you can't work because of health or whatever. And, common sense will tell you. See, my common sense told me years ago, as I got to know a little bit and got a little wiser in business and people's identities and learned some things about leadership, I realized my mother and father had identities that were such that they weren't going to accumulate much money in their life. With that being true, knowing they were part of a generation that would age and use it, and because of their genetics, both having relatives that lived to ripe old ages. My dad passed away in his 92nd year. My mom's just about ready to turn 88. And so I knew, my common sense told me, applied with my business sense, that I needed to give some thought to saving additionally, earning more and saving more, because I was going to need to help my parents. And now with my mom's health and dementia and those things, it costs us several $100,000 a year to get her the care that's needed. I knew, even though not knowing exactly what the situation was, I knew it was very possible that that was going to happen. And I worked hard 30-some years ago preparing for the time that I'm living in now. Common sense, if you'll use it and project it, will give you simple answers. You don't need to be a prophet, right? You just need to understand cause and effect and people and personalities and identities, and we learn these things. You've all had, many of you on this that are listening right now, have had some of those same feelings and thoughts. And what's important is to respond to them. In other words, you don't say to yourself, man, I need to control my expenses. And then you just go blow a bunch of money. Go throw a bunch of stuff on credit cards and overdo it. Someone I respect a great deal in this area is Penny Oy. Penny and Benjamin are wonderful in this area. They have a whole bunch of common sense. But Penny likes a nice office, but she negotiates fiercely and gets reasonable rates. But another thing she does, she'll then go on Craigslist and get all kinds of good deals and quality stuff to furnish it, and decorate it for, 10 and 20 cents on the dollar. Well, see, that's business sense. We end up with something that's first class for a fraction of the cost. That's why people like us like Costco so much. Isn't that right? And so, other than the sampling areas, and all the snacks and stuff. And so, controlling expenses is an extension of common sense. So, if you have trouble controlling expenses, you got a common sense problem. You got a business sense problem. It's interesting. One guy that billed me once, he was wonderful at controlling his personal expenses, and he'd blow it in his business. Somehow he thought that helped him. My example of running things in a tight, effective way, I invested back in my business, but I did it lean, and put out, because what I needed to do was use my hard work and my character, my personality to lead. And if they wanted me to be flashy, they had the wrong guy, because I wanted that control. See, business sense will also tell you that you need to run a simple, effective system. It doesn't need to have a bunch of complication to it. See, another person that's a superstar in this area and understanding this principle is Swan Wen. I never had anybody that grabbed onto it better. Ed Milet was another one. And I could name numerous others that understood this principle, that this was critical in getting them where they wanted to go and helping their team. They know the more complicated stuff it becomes, the harder it is to duplicate, and the less effect, and the slower, and you develop leadership in people much more slowly, and they confuse and struggle and fail at higher rates than if you run a simple, effective system. All right? So one of my kind of watchwords and part of my own written plan is to remind myself to keep things simple, that there's power in simplicity, just like there's power in clarity. And it's a lot easier to get clarity if you have simplicity. And of course, keyword effective, you got to make sure that it works, and we developed that a long time ago. So think about this, where clear thinking leads to what, so much more effective ways in relationship building, and it's so much better for running a business and business sense. And my last thing couple of points I want to make here is that you'll understand, if you have common sense, that winning requires commitment, it requires time and effort, and it requires getting competent, getting reasonably good at what you do. I've said many times that you don't have to be great at things, but you got to get good at doing a corporate overview or BPM. You got to get good at doing a first presentation, basically good at closing, good at it, doing a follow-up interview or whatever it might be. And common sense tells you got to apply yourself. You got to be a good student. I believe it was my common sense and some good instruction from my father, who had a lot of common sense too. And I drew a lot of it from him and my mom. But the reality is, that if there was somebody who was living a life that was the kind of life I wanted to live, both in how they made decisions and conducted themselves emotionally and spiritually, as well as the way they conducted themselves in the business, then I wanted to learn from them. And I reached out to those people, and developed mentor relationships with them. And of course, it was wonderful in its effectiveness, because mentoring changed my life. This isn't a conversation about mentoring. I've had those, and I'll have other ones in the future. But I believe it was my common sense and my business sense that said, look, I may have an ego and I may have some pride, but I can't let that get in the way of winning for us and our family and for our team and their families. And so I am a huge fan of common sense. I would like you to increase your appreciation for it. I'd like you to increase your commitment to developing it and to using it. There you go. All right. Once you get this and you get the confidence that goes with good decision making, lots and lots of good things. Don't you like this little sign, this little icon? If you're not watching on computer, it's a sign that says, it's a picture of a sign that says, yield to common sense, as opposed to yield to oncoming traffic. All right? Yield to common sense. Good things will happen. Let's take our second pillar, will to win. Got the greatest sprinter in the world there from Jamaica, St. Bolt. Unbelievable. Talk about a will to win. And let's talk about this as something essential to success at any substantial level. Will to win. And I'm going to start with a statement. There's nothing wrong with being obsessed. There's nothing wrong with being obsessed. Right? This is a powerful thing, but you got to make sure the power is used properly. Right? Just be obsessed with worthy things. But I'm a fan of being obsessed. I'm a fan of being obsessed with my wife. I'm a fan of being obsessed with our children. I'm a fan of being obsessed with faith and service. in our faith, and I'm a fan of being obsessed with our company, our business. Now, I love golf, but at the time I was obsessed with it, but it's not important enough. So I don't allow myself to be obsessed with it. I mean, you can't, but I'm just saying, for my life, I have 3 major obsessions. I've stated them many times. Any of you who know me know what they are: faith, family, and business. Those are my obsessions. I tie my will to win with those things, because if I scattered it too much, I couldn't win at anything. And that would be very frustrating, because I have a will to win. So I made a decision that I was willing to be less good in golf or tennis or the other sports that I had proficiency, or some of these other things that I enjoyed, right, and zeroed in on the things that I love and allowed myself to get obsessed with it. You see, it's fine and fun to be somebody. Now, I know we're all children of God, so we're all somebody, no question. But we have the ability, through our choices, to become people of influence, or for you to become a person of influence, where you're in a wonderful position to take care of your own and have then substantial resources to change the lives of others. Influence, resources, wonderful things can happen here. I could tell story after story of people I've watched in the business really become somebody and become men and women of influence. And I watch them take their influence for good, and it ripples out. And because of their increased capacity, and because they got good at some things, and then they had resources to bless lives. We have a neighbor, and I know of them. I don't know them really well, but they have an employee who now does some things for us, helps care for homes. And he was telling me the story. He has one daughter, and he's not a prosperous man. But this couple, he was talking with them about it and his concern about his daughter's education. And this is a really wonderful guy. This happened a couple of years ago. And this couple really liked this person who worked with them and his attitude and understood it, and they're generous people, and they prospered. And they sat him down and said, "We want you to know that we're going to pay for the education of your daughter. We're going to take care of her and make sure she gets whatever education she can qualify for and that she wants and wherever she wants to go." A tremendous, generous act. That was people of influence having resources to change the lives of others. We go through thousands of examples. This is one of the reasons I'm a fan of having a will to win, of getting obsessed with worthy things. And you go be somebody. You go become a person of influence. You get in a position where you can take care of your own, no matter what happens. And that you then have the resources as you run into worthy causes and situations where you can make the difference, where you can be the person that changes the lives of that individual, that young woman, that young man, or whatever it might be, or that person who's hurting. Right? This is why we should work hard, right? And it's the greatest kind of life. I'll talk about some more of this stuff, but I get passionate about this. I want you to hate being average and ordinary. I want you to leave mediocrity behind. Not because of some pep talk I'm giving you, right? This isn't, we're going to go play a football game, and I want a good, hard few hours from you, right? I'm talking about the rest of your life and your own decision-making. I have an absolute understanding. Common sense has told me there's only one kind of motivation, and that's self-motivation. Surely, someone that's highly motivated can have a little bit of influence of people around them, for a little while, but as soon as they're out of sight or out of hearing, the person is back left to their own devices. And they've got to make internal decisions of their own so they become motivated. I decided I was sick of being average and ordinary. It's one of the reasons I started in the business. I did want to be somebody. I did want these things to happen in my life. I did want to leave mediocrity behind. I was tired of being poor and being frustrated that things were tight and not having enough. And I'd gotten married, and I didn't want to be in that situation. I didn't want my wife to be in that situation. You understand, you deserve to win big. You deserve to win big. But I promise you, you're going to have to develop some common sense, and you're going to have a will to win. Man, I love talking about this stuff. It's so dang important. Let's go to number 3, mental toughness. So we talked about common sense. We talked about will to win. Now we're going to talk about mental toughness. There's some overlap here, from will to win to mental toughness. I believe will to win really helps you develop mental toughness, but it's not all there is. Now, one thing, mental toughness is developed over time, kind of one experience at a time. I remember the stuff when I first got started. I ran into a negative situation when one of my guys quit, and I loved this guy, good guy, and I knew he could be big, and I thought he'd be in business with us for a long time, and he kind of just curled up and quit. Had a few adversities, and there it was. And that hurt. But if I had that same experience a year later, didn't bother me as much. Still cared about people, but I understood kind of that's the way it is. I was going to go get another recruit anyway, and I was going to help our people get more recruits. We were going to find the people we needed to find. I'd made up my mind on that. I remember when I made the decision to stop worrying that the law of averages controlled my business, right? That not everybody won, that not everybody said yes, that not everybody bought. And I stopped worrying about that. I let go of it. I became mentally tough. Common sense told me that, but I had to develop the mental toughness to deal with what that common sense told me. And so I got stronger. I once heard a person give a talk, great talk, and he used the example, and he was very physical about it. He slapped himself, and he did it. Where he slapped himself, you heard the smack of it pretty good. He left a mark on himself, on the mic, and you could hear it in the microphone. He says, boy, when it used to happen, something like that, I used to get slapped by something in the business, and it's such a perfect analogy. He'd go, oh my gosh, and I was all distracted, and I didn't know what to do, and what did it mean, and maybe I'm not cut out for, that kind of stuff. He says, but steadily, one experience at a time, and he just started slapping himself. Right hand, left hand, looking straight out at us in the audience. Right hand, left hand. And he says, it didn't take my eye off the ball at all. All that little stuff that used to bother me didn't bother me anymore. I'd gotten mentally tough. Well, I want you to understand something. Entrepreneurs and leaders have to have it. If you're really going to do the job, if you're going to be effective, you've got to develop this. Every leader who's been around the business a while is understanding what I'm talking about. You've had those experiences. You've had them one at a time. The tough BPM, the tough interviews, the person who changes their mind after they bought, and of course that was a big sale, and the chargeback that you didn't expect, and you either went in the tank and hid in the closet and sucked your thumb, or it caused you to get after it even more. The more mental toughness you have, this has nothing to do with being harsh with people. It has nothing to do with being mean. Nothing of the sort. One thing it does mean, though, is that you know what you stand for. Your most mentally tough people know what they stand for. They've resolved to never quit. You have an internal resolve to never quit. It's part of mental toughness. I know what I stand for. I'm never going to quit. Well, I am when I die, right? But that's the thing. Now I have another great quote for you, for Jim Rohn, another great teacher, who's done a lot in the field of kind of motivation and personal development and even sales training, that kind of thing. But this is an interesting quote. Listen to this because it applies to mental toughness and not having you use it, hey, I'm tough, so you use it as an excuse to be mean to people. That is not what I'm talking about. That means you know what you stand for, you're never going to quit, and the adversity doesn't get you down very much anymore. You take the good with the bad and keep on coming, all right, with a smile on your face. But listen to this quote. The challenge of leadership is to be strong, but not rude. To be kind, but not weak. To be bold, but not a bully. To be humble, but not timid. To be proud, but not arrogant. And to have humor, but without folly or without foolishness, right? So think of that. Strong, not rude. Kind, not weak. Bold, not bully. Humble, not timid. Proud, not arrogant. Right? Humor, but not foolish. And so I hope that we could spend a lot of time talking about this one and more on each of these. But now these are three of the pillars. I think you're going to hold up your life, your business, lots of things. What are they? Common sense, will to win, and mental toughness. Let's go ahead to the fourth. Personal discipline. Again, you understand how there's some overlap here. You see, the reality is success requires sacrifice. Hey, if you're going to get better at hitting a baseball, you're going to spend a lot of time practicing hitting baseballs, and everything about it. And if you're going to get good at doing a BPM, you're going to have to do something. You get good at doing an interview, you got to do something. You get good at doing a first presentation or a close or getting referrals, you're going to have to do it, right? You're going to have to practice it. And you got to understand the difference between short term and long term, in your thinking. There are lots of people that can be disciplined in the short term, right? But real winning, the kind we're talking about now in business is about thinking long term, knowing that there's some things you're going to have to give up that are part of a casual lifestyle. And it might be some partying. It might be watching a lot of TV. It might be your love of sport. I had to give up the love of it. I never given up the love of golf. But I had to give up the kind of time it took, playing 3-4 times a week that it takes to stay good and improve your game. I decided, where did I really want to improve my game the most? And I decided I wanted to improve my game spiritually. I wanted to improve my game as a husband and a family man. And I wanted to improve my game as a businessman. That these would be the areas of greatest reward. So if you put me on a TV show about trivia, about television shows, I'm doomed. I can't tell you anything about it. Pay no attention to it. Or lots of other things. But you put me on a show that asks about how we run the machine in our business, right? Or how to be a good husband or father, or what I think are the principles we need to live by, to be strong spiritually and have good things happen to us and live a good, happy life. When I think I can raise my hand, I can push the buzzer and give an answer to those things. Lots of them anyway. I'm not some Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda, but at the same time, I've got a handle on this stuff because we've really worked at it. And I understand the personal discipline was something that was going to be required, that I was going to have to provide, that I was going to have to do that sacrifice. I needed to know when to say no at the right time. People pull on you, all kinds of things happen. And you got to know when to defend your spiritual time, when to defend your family time, your business time. I said no to lots of recreations. There's some things I've had a chance to do that I had to say no to. I had a chance to go play in a golf tournament, but there's just other things that I wanted to do more, right? It's that I'm in that season of my life, where I'm rigorous about those priorities. And so, but there are other ones I am playing in, right? There is one I'm playing in, and I'm going to take several days to do it. But I'd only do that once in a year, so I'm not going to take that much time away. And I've got Cindy talked into spending some time down there with me at the same time. So, can you say no at the right time? When your friends call you up and say, "Woo, let's go out and be idiots," or whatever, they don't usually say that. But it's quite often what they mean. You got to know when to say no, right? So, it comes to balance. You need personal discipline to get any element of balance. And there it is. Faith, family, business, baby. You know I was going to write it down somewhere. You know, it takes personal discipline, and personal discipline tells you you've got to get a written plan and stay on it. Right? Your common sense tells you that too. Common sense will tell you that it's hard to stay motivated long term. Right? That you need to learn how to get to the point where you don't distract easily. And becoming indistractable, not indestructible, indistractable, it requires real effort. Personal discipline is what gives you these things. You know, as you'll learn to do the things and say the things yourself and affirm the things yourself and have a written plan that really assists you in staying motivated long term. Also back to the other thing I was talking about of knowing what you stand for and mental toughness. That helps you stay motivated. The resolve to never quit allows you to keep on keeping on when you're not super motivated. But now also personal discipline, and I've really worked on this, helps you become indistractable. My discipline allowed me to put my hobbies away and not take on others. And there's regular things. I resigned from a couple of boards recently because I think we're coming to a season where we really need to pour it on in the company again. And with some changes that are occurring, most positive, I think we really need to pour it on again in some dramatic ways. If we're going to double in size again, well, that's going to require my contribution as well as the contribution of a lot of other good people, right? And I'm kind of clearing the decks, resigned from a couple of boards, you know, and just not as involved in a couple other things. Personal discipline keeps you, as does common sense and business sense, from overspending. But the problem with overspending is the pressure it puts on you distracts you. It distracts you emotionally. It's hard to get it off your mind when you've overspent and you're under that kind of pressure. And so if you want to become indistractable, you've got to get this under control. You know, you've also, one of the things that can distract you is peer pressure. You have all kinds of people of lesser ability, of less common sense, of less will to win, you know, of less mental toughness that might try and have influence on you. It might be some family members, it might be old buds or whatever. And I had to develop, and you would have to develop, the discipline to overcome that, right? Also, you need to protect yourself from investing in goofy stuff. Sometimes it's not even that goofy, but you just don't got time for it. You know, especially if it's something very different from what you do. And so I mean that more of a leaders who have money to invest. And they'll get goofy stuff presented to them. And part of the reason I learned that is I invested a couple of goofy things that bit me, right? Nothing serious, but I learned some lessons from it. I'm just grateful they weren't super expensive. But as we look at all of this, you know, this personal discipline where success requires sacrifice, and it teaches us and it helps us do these things that are so important. All right, we're winding up now. Hang in there. Here comes number 5. Again, if you knew me, you'd know I believe this is one of the 5 pillars and the one to finish with. And that's strength of character. So we got common sense, will to win, mental toughness, personal discipline, and strength of character. Here we go. The previous 4, let me click it here. The previous 4 are not enough if we mess up here. Your will to win, your mental toughness, your personal discipline. I had a mentor. This time I loved this guy. Still love him in a way. But when you stop trusting someone and you lose respect, you know, it's different. It's different in how you feel, of course. And in the season that he was my mentor, there were just so many things about all these things I've talked about that he assisted me in helping to understand. But then I watched him stumble. I watched him lose sight of some of the things he stood for. I watched some pride take over. I watched some greed take over, which means it reduced his common sense. And he started doing what? Well, making bad decisions. See, strength of character governs all our important decision making. Actually, our character governs all our important decision making. Weak character governs all important decision making. Strong character governs all. So it's really character that does that. But when you think of making good decisions, we'll say strength of character governs all important and good decision making. The word important not being critical there, good being the one that's critical. It governs all good decision making. And I tell you what, your decision making is important, right? Because that's what tells us who you are. This is what tells the world who I am. And it creates, as a way of thinking about it, you guys, a powerful personal brand. So you all have a personal brand. And you have real strength of character, I promise you that gives you a powerful personal brand. Now, you could be a very bad person, and that's a powerful personal brand too. History is full of people like that, and we've all met people like that. But that's not, of course, what we're interested in developing. And it won't work here, not with our system. Our system is all volunteer. People are here because they choose to be here, and they're going to follow you because they choose to follow you, not because they're forced to. You know, we're not putting them on a payroll, you know, and they don't need us to pay their bills. Most people, the overwhelming majority of us, are part-time in the system. Well, your personal brand, right, and you making good decisions, you know, like the kind of things I discussed earlier. You know, it's better to be kind than it is to be mean. You know, these kinds of decisions are the ones that govern how we're perceived. But hold on to the thought that the other ones are not enough if we mess up here. If we get prideful, greedy, arrogant, you know, and the obnoxious things that come from that. Or we find, you know, people find they can't trust us, which is obviously the cornerstone or one of the foundation stones of strength of character. Also, strength of character helps us think long term. Remember, I said common sense cause you to want to do it that way. Well, I want you to also understand it's strength of character that really helps us think long term. You know, I have another quote for you here from a man not that familiar named Dennis Prager, but I'll give him credit for it because it's where I got it. Goodness is about character, integrity, honesty, kindness, generosity, moral courage, and the like. More than anything else, it's about how we treat other people. Well, certainly, we've talked about that before. Well, that's a wonderful quote. Goodness is about character, integrity, honesty, kindness, generosity, moral courage, and the like. More than anything else, it's about how we treat other people. This is our brand, and this is what we want our brand to be. We're going to think long term this way. Be more patient with people. Understand that building people is a lifetime pursuit, just like us building ourselves is a lifetime pursuit, perhaps an eternal pursuit. And we do understand, right, that what we stand for, our moral courage, all of these things govern our decision making, right? You see, strength of character, and this is one of the bottom lines, helps us understand and live by the golden rule. I think common sense helps us understand it too. But strength of character that helps us live it by it. That we should do unto others as we would have them do unto ourselves. Okay. So as you look at these things, these 5 things, I hope I've given you some good stuff that you can turn around and teach your teams. So, this would be good subject matter for your family across the dinner table, talking about these 5 areas, right? Because we want all our children to have common sense and, you with me? All that jazz, will to win, mental toughness. Yeah? Especially one of them has strength of character, since it rules the other 4. So, okay, let's, sorry, I'm laughing. Someone just put a comment. Lawrence Lombard said, "We need you as President of the United States." Yeah, I like it right where I'm at. But I would like to hear more of this stuff from the people that lead us politically. It seems that too many of us in our countries are willing to put up with a lot less than this. And that's too bad. But here we need to create this stuff in our businesses. I think of creating an oasis in a desert of foolishness and bad behavior within our families and within our teams. We can create this great environment, right? And it's built on these 5 things, with this last one being the exclamation point. All right. Let me tell you about next one. The next webinar is developing a world-class winning attitude. I've already given you some tips on that today. Love this picture. That little boy with that look. Yes, you can. Right? Because a lot of you struggle with believing that about yourself. And we're going to work on some of those things. And the things that I learned, things I've been taught about how to develop a world-class winning attitude. November 9th, second Wednesday of November, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. World-class winning attitude. Yes, you can. Yeah. Okay. That's what we're going to do next time. Okay, I've been asked, here, you go ahead, Trevor. A couple of people have asked to see a couple of slides again. We've got a few minutes left, and so we are going to go back to, he's good at this stuff. And there it is. Someone wanted to see that one? Okay, there it is. You want to see number 2 again? And we're trying to be a little more responsive to some of your comments. And cool. Anyway, some of you are saying some really kind things, even touching things, and I want to thank you for it. I appreciate it. Uh-oh, now somebody wants to see number 3. Okay, we've opened the floodgates.
It's going to be online.
Yeah, it will be online, you guys. This is not the last time you'll see it. And leaders can always contact us, and we'll send you a copy of it. That would be Trevor, not me, my son-in-law, and or Lorraine, my assistant. If you ask me to start emailing stuff, it might take like a year. So there we are. All right, there's your quote. All right, everybody. Thanks. We're good to go. And we'll leave it at that. All right, everybody. Thanks for being in the business with us. Hang in there. We can do this. We'll go to work on Yes You Can again and next month. Bye.